What if you're not afraid to use your voice and speak up and show up, but instead you're afraid to relive what happened to you when you did? If speaking up ever led to punishment, rejection, ridicule, mocking, withdrawal of love, your body remembers that, even if your mind doesn't. That's why courage isn't always enough when we say we want to find our voice. We need more. Welcome to Pulling Threads, a podcast about the patterns we carry, the work of unraveling them, and what becomes possible when we do. I'm a therapist, a former attorney, and a mindfulness teacher, and someone who's recovered and found her voice after many years of being afraid to use it. I now work with people who are rebuilding their lives after major transitions, breakups, divorce, loss of job, new job, transformation, all the things. And today I want to talk about something that shows up constantly in my work with clients and honestly in my own life. This may have been the biggest hurdle and the biggest area of work I have had to do on myself. This is not just talking about speaking up in a meeting or public speaking or having a difficult conversation. I'm talking about the deeper fear of putting yourself and your ideas out into the world, even though you know that you can and you know they would help others. The kind of fear that makes you second guess every word before you say it. It keeps you from sharing what you actually think or makes your throat tighten when you're about to speak your truths. And I want to talk about why this happens, where it comes from, and what the work of reclaiming your voice actually looks like. Because it's not a one-time decision, and it's not easy work. It's layered. It takes time. And if you're someone who struggles with this, I want you to know that you are not broken and you are not alone. I am right there with you. This is ongoing work for me, but this podcast, it's a testament to how well that work has gone. Let me start off by telling you a little bit about my own experience because I think it's important to name kind of both sides of this. I didn't always struggle to use my voice. My family can attest to that. And I think when I was really young, I was pretty vocal. I was very strong-minded, the kind of kid who had really big opinions and deep thoughts and initially wasn't afraid to share them. Somewhere along the way, that changed for me. And I can point to specific moments when I learned that using my voice didn't feel safe. In my family, growing up, manners and being quiet were really, really important. And I witnessed and experienced pretty extreme punishment for talking out of turn or speaking my mind. If you had a strong opinion about something, especially in my more extended family, there could have been a lot of sarcasm, mocking, a lot of zingers. People would laugh at you, tease you, maybe turn your earnest attempt at conversation into entertainment for everyone else. And the more strongly you felt about something, the more likely you were going to be made fun of. I love my family, and I know saying this here publicly that I am not alone and that many, many families operate this way. But I can still feel it, honestly. There's this tightness in my throat when I think about trying to have like an intelligent argument with people in my family, only to be mocked or laughed at or treated as if it was too much, if that makes sense. Because I think I was too much sometimes. And at some point, I just stopped. Because what was the point? Why put myself out there just to be humiliated? I also remember very clearly losing confidence in performance. In sixth grade, I got the lead in the musical at school. I sang, I loved it, I felt alive, I loved it. And by seventh grade, I had completely lost confidence in that. Something happened between those 2 years, and I don't even know exactly what it was, but the shift was real. And it shifted me away from performing and into science and academics more than I already was. And then there was another major shift. When I started dating my ex-husband, he was very well educated, extremely, like very intelligent and intellectual, which I loved. I'm definitely attracted to intellectual conversation and intelligent men. But there were sometimes comments about my education level coming from a really small town in the Midwest, and words like pedigree and comparisons to social status were brought up. And the simplicity of my language compared to others was pointed out. There were small comments, what I would say now felt like little put downs, but they added up. And I remember distinctly once I was working in a research lab at WashU in St. Louis doing functional MRI research, like getting published on those papers. But I was working with a lot of physicians and PhDs and people in that research world, which I loved. I loved neuroscience and studying the brain. When I entered the lab, I felt competent, I felt capable, but I think the combination of entering that relationship with someone so intelligent and having my education level be pointed out, I would actually start stammering sometimes. I remember being in a meeting with one of the physicians that I worked with and actually struggling to get the words out because I was so closely monitoring my speech and my language that I couldn't put words together properly. So coming into a situation feeling competent and intelligent and then suddenly shifting to being so embarrassed about my speech and language that I could barely communicate my thoughts was dramatic. But I moved through it and didn't really think much of it at the time. Looking back now, I can see how harmful all of that was, regardless of whether the intent was harm. It was. But in the moment, I just internalized it and I believed I wasn't smart enough, articulate enough, educated enough. I changed my education route from neuropsychologist to attorney because it felt like there would be no way I could attain a PhD. It just felt impossible. And my voice, this thing that had been so strong when I was young, I think part of it, that confident, intellectual part, disappeared. So, why does this happen? Like, why do people who were once confident, vocal, even performative, end up afraid to use their voice? I also want to point out that I was first a speech pathologist. So, understanding actual, like, anatomy of the voice and how our brain creates our voice was my job and my passion. So I have so much background in using our voice from so many different directions. But I never understood the answer to this question. How do people lose their voice? They lose it by learning it wasn't safe. And that learning can happen through repeated experiences, sometimes big ones, sometimes very small ones, where speaking up resulted in harm. Maybe it was punishment, maybe it was mockery, maybe it was just being ignored or dismissed. Ugh. Like, I feel those moments when you say something to a group of friends or to a friend, and it's as if you haven't spoken. Maybe it was a relationship where your words were constantly corrected. Having another adult correct your grammar as an adult or criticize your actual grammar is demoralizing and traumatic. So over time, your nervous system starts to associate using your voice with danger. And when that happens, your body develops protective responses. For some people, it's tightness in the throat. For others, it's stammering, losing your train of thought. Some people go completely blank when they're about to speak. And you might even notice that only happens around certain people. There's a reason. These aren't personality flaws. They're trauma responses. Your body is trying to keep you safe from the emotional harm it learned to expect when you use your voice in certain ways. Research shows that this is incredibly common, especially for women. Women are interrupted more often in conversations. Their ideas are more dismissed or attributed to someone else. And when women are assertive, they face social penalties more than men. There's a double standard at play. We're told to speak up, but also to be nice, to not be too much, to know our place. But this isn't a gender issue completely. Anyone raised in an authoritarian household or in families where emotions were very volatile, or in relationships where control was maintained through criticism. And that can include friendships. They learn the same lesson. All those situations teach us the same thing, that silence equals safety. And I think it's important to talk about how relationships can reinforce this pattern. Because a lot of the people I work with and a lot of the people who listen here are in a relationship that they know is not really working for them. I don't want to use the word toxic, but maybe it is toxic for some of you. Or maybe it's just not working. Maybe it's impacting your voice. When you're in a relationship with someone who positions themselves as more intelligent, more educated, or more articulate than you, it can be incredibly damaging, even if they never raise their voice or call you names. The subtle corrections, the comparisons, the comments about your language or your thinking, those things accumulate and they tell your subconscious something about you. And what happens is your nervous system starts to anticipate feelings of humiliation before you ever speak. You start editing yourself in real time. You second guess everything you say. You might even develop physical symptoms like stammering. This is what psychological abuse looks like. It's not always loud, obvious, or even intentional. Sometimes it's quiet and insidious, but it teaches you that your voice is a liability. So what does it take to reclaim your voice after years of learning to silence yourself? Because obviously I have done that. And I want to be clear about this. It's not a one-time decision. It's not about just being brave or getting over it. This is some layered work because this most likely didn't come about from one instance or one person in your life. It's accumulated over time. The first layer is awareness. You have to recognize how and when you learned to silence yourself. And again, it may not be one thing. You have to see patterns. the family dynamics, friendships, relationships, the moments where you decided it was safer to be quiet. For me, those aha moments of when I realized that there were people in my life who I would be too embarrassed to speak up with or feel intimidated about speaking up with were sometimes surprising. And now I can look back and say, yes, if that person were still in my life, or if this group of people were still in my life regularly, I wouldn't be doing this podcast. I wouldn't have been able to. Because my nervous system would have continued to protect me by keeping me quiet and knowing that engaging or seeing or interacting with certain people in my life would have meant being made fun of, questioned, drilled about what I'm doing here on this podcast. And I'm so grateful that those relationships are not holding me back. I wish they never did, but I've learned a lot. And now I can help other people move through this because I understand where that came from. So you have to see the patterns and develop awareness. The second layer is grief. And this one's hard. You have to mourn those years that you spent being small, the ideas you didn't share, the parts of yourself you kept hidden. There's a real loss there, and it deserves to be acknowledged. And I also want to be clear that because you now have an awareness, some of those things you kept quiet about, some of those ideas you had about ways to express yourself and share your lessons with the world, they're still there. Those opportunities are still there. On the phone today, I was talking to my mom and she said, I think you need to write a book. And I said, that's funny. I have 2 books that I want to write, maybe 3. One I've wanted to write since I was 31. I came up with the idea when I was 31. I'm not quite ready for that book yet because it requires me to be a little bit older. But the other 2 books are ready. They're ready to come out of me, and I am ready to present them and use my voice in that way. And it's such a good feeling, so powerful. All of those ideas that you had that maybe you needed to keep to yourself will have a time and a place to reemerge. And that brings us to the third layer, which is experimentation. You have to start practicing using your voice in safer spaces. Maybe that's with a therapist. I have had 7 years of therapy now, and it plays a pivotal role in me stepping up and putting myself out into the world more and more. And I am so incredibly grateful for all of my life coaches, therapists. Thank you, Kendra. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Dallas. Like, they all got me here. In addition to many, many, many friends who supported me to make me feel safe. Even when I started the podcast, friends who stepped up and agreed to come on the podcast really early on when it was still very rough, without hesitation, to support me and my voice. So thank you to all of you as well. Maybe your practicing is just with a therapist. Maybe it's with a supportive community. Maybe it's just journaling or recording voice notes where no one else is listening. The point is to rebuild the neural pathway between I have a thought and I can express it without fear and without fear of the response hijacking you. Now, the fourth layer is ongoing. It's regulation. You have to learn to notice what happens in your body when you speak. Where does the fear live? What does it feel like? Can you stay present with it instead of shutting down or running away? For me, this work involved therapy, a lot of somatic practices, and a lot of mindfulness training. It also involved finding communities where I could speak without being punished for it, or side-eyed, or heckled. Places where my voice was welcomed and not just tolerated. And slowly over time, something did start shifting, and I started speaking on this podcast. I started writing publicly. My Substack is ready to go. The confidence I have in my writing now is a testament to the work I've done with my therapist and my life coach, starting way back, 2018 or 19. I started having conversations where I didn't immediately defer to the other person's perspective, which was a huge leap forward for me. And I stopped waiting for permission to have thoughts. I now know that not only did I lose my voice, but I lost the trust in myself to speak up and know what I was even talking about. I relied on other people in my life to tell me what was right for me. And if they said my ideas or my thoughts were wrong, I believed them. Losing your voice can be a lot more than just not speaking. Now, the fear didn't immediately disappear. I'm not going to tell you that it did, but it did stop controlling me. And that's a huge, huge difference. I wouldn't be here if it was still controlling me. Do I hesitate about talking about certain topics still? Yes, but there are good reasons for some of those. And the other ones that don't have good reasons are coming. They're coming. So here's what I want you to know, if you're still listening, and if you're recognizing yourself in any of this. Your fear of using your voice is not irrational. It's not a character flaw. It's not evidence that you're weak or broken or unintelligent or poorly spoken or any of those things. It's a learned response to real experiences, and your nervous system is trying to protect you. In the past, it needed to, and it did its job. And for me, that was necessary because the mocking and the insulting were hurting me. So my only choice was to keep talking and keep being hurt or shut up. And that's what I chose most of the time. But the conditions have changed now. You're not in your family, your workplace, in that relationship or that friend group, whatever it was that was holding you back and telling you your voice didn't matter or wasn't worthy of being heard. I hope you've moved on from those groups, those people. I hope you're not in that environment anymore. You're not in that environment where speaking up means punishment. And now the work is teaching your nervous system that it's safe to speak. That work takes time and patience, and it takes support, but it's possible. And when you start to reclaim your voice, when you start to speak without apology, without editing yourself, without trying to fit someone else's comfort level, something really fundamental starts changing. You stop living small, you start taking up space, not aggressively, but without fear. You might find that your language doesn't need to be sophisticated or academic to be valuable. Mine doesn't. You might discover that people who truly matter aren't interested in performance. They want to hear what you actually think. You might realize that the version of yourself who was always there, the one who had things to say, was just waiting for it to be safe enough to speak. If you're doing this work right now, if you're in the process of reclaiming your voice and finding yourself and living authentically after years of silencing, I see you. And I know how hard it is. And I want you to know that you're not alone in this. If you want support as you navigate this process, that's exactly the kind of work I do at the Loom Life. And I have many other people in my life who I could refer you to if you have a relationship with me that prevents us from working together. I work with people who are rebuilding after divorce, breakups, big life changes, all the time. After years of learning to be small, they're finding their voice. Maybe they're even reinventing themselves. And part of that rebuilding is finding your voice. You can learn more about how I work with people at theloomlife.com, or you could book a call, chat with me. I'd love to talk with you. We are going to keep going with this conversation and with other conversations that I think we might find uncomfortable, because these conversations mean calling out the people and the structures in our life that have held us back or that have programmed us wrongly. And it's not because we are trying to play the victim. It's because we are trying to move past that small way of living. That's what I'm teaching my clients who come to me to work on this. They want to live their life authentically and find themselves. And some system or group or person in their life made them feel like they couldn't do that. But you can, and you will. And if you are working with a therapist already, good for you. Talk to them about this. How can I find my voice? How can I show up the way I want to show up every single day? Once you start, it's very addictive. I will warn you. You won't want to stop talking even when your podcast episode is over. If you want more information, again, go to theloomlife.com, or you can follow me on The Loom Life on Instagram and Facebook, or Loom Life Therapy if you want something a little more clinical. Until next time, I'm wishing you the best.